Welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in once again. You are listening to the account with the news summary for day 380 of the war in Ukraine. Today was a fairly quiet day and there was not much reported. All updates are grouped into the usual situation inside Ukraine, including articles on the funeral of Dmytro da Vinci Kotsiubailo, the occupied territories, Russia and Belarus, and the international developments. But before we start the news, the flashpoints along the front. Bakhmut. Russia's main focus is currently on Ivanivske and the area around the MiG-17 monument in the south and the metal processing plant in the north of Bakhmut. Heavy battles are reported in the areas. Minor frontline changes are reported in the northwest, but nothing major to report on. The famous MiG-17 monument in Bakhmut has been destroyed by fighting. On March 9th, it was reportedly still intact. Additionally, Maxar Technologies has published satellite pictures of Bakhmut showing the destruction of the city. Vuhledar. Russia continues its attacks in the area. As the Institute for the Study of War reported today, Russia is also planning to renew the offensive here. Oleksiy Dmytro, the spokesman of the defense forces of the Tavria region, announced that Ukrainian defenders destroyed about 2 battalions of the enemy in the area in the last week. He also stated that due to losses suffered, a Russian offensive in the area is out of the question. To start the news segment, a look at all the minor news updates out of Ukraine. The memorial service for Dmytro da Vinci Kotsiubailo, the fallen hero of Ukraine, has been attended by President Volodymyr Zelensky, Valery Zaluzhny, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksiy Reznikov, Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Kirilo Budanov, Head of Ukrainian Defense Intelligence, and Sanna Marin, Prime Minister of Finland, who is on a visit to Kyiv. President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Ukraine is not involved in the sabotage of the Nordstream gas pipelines. "It's funny, to be honest," Zelensky told reporters. "We are interested in weapons being supplied, sanctions being introduced, and our victory." The Security Service of Ukraine has served the former CEO of Antonov State Enterprise, the acting deputy CEO, and the Deputy Director for Aviation Security with notices of suspicion for their action obstructing the lawful activities of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, which led to the Russian seizure of Hostomel airfield and the destruction of the AN-225 Mriya aircraft. According to Oleksiy Lyubov, head of the Kharkiv Oblast Military Administration, some 520,000 consumers remain without electricity in Kharkiv Oblast after yesterday's missile attack. Russia's missile attack might speed up the West's deliveries of advanced air defense systems to Ukraine, the deputy head of the Ukrainian president's office, Oleksiy Kuleba, has stated. The former Ukrainian president, Viktor Yanukovych, and the ex-deputy head of the State Security Department will be tried in absentia for inciting desertion and organizing illegal crossing over the state border. Next up, the latest regarding the situation in the occupied territories. Sergei Aksyonov, the so-called head of the Russian administration in occupied Crimea, has said that the construction of the defense line in Crimea is going according to plan. The occupation authorities are acting unconventionally. The so-called Supreme Courts of the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics in the occupied part of the Donbas have convicted Maksym Butkevych, a human rights activist and journalist who served in the armed forces of Ukraine and was captured, to 13 years in prison. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. Russia has sent captured US-made weapons and military equipment which Ukraine received from the US and NATO to Iran. The US believes Tehran will try to make their own copies of these systems. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner PMC, has admitted that his communication with Russian officials has been cut off in order to keep him from asking for ammunition for his mercenaries. Meanwhile, Serhiy Cherevati, spokesperson for the eastern grouping of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, stated that Ukraine is closely monitoring the conflict between Prigozhin and the Russian military leadership. The Ukrainian Defense Forces believe that Wagner's inglorious history is coming to an end. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. The House of Representatives, the lower chamber of the Belgian parliament, has recognized the Holodomor as genocide against the Ukrainian people. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and French President Emmanuel Macron stated at a press conference in Paris that they agreed on joint training of Ukrainian Marines. Pope Francis said in an interview that he wanted to go to Moscow to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the beginning of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He noted that on the second day of the war, he went to the Russian embassy in the Vatican to say that he was ready to go to Moscow if Putin would give him a window for negotiations. Francis said that Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov wrote to him, "Thank you, but now is not the time." The director of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, William Burns, stated during hearings in the House of Representatives that China and its leader Xi Jinping may change their thinking about Taiwan because of Russia's war against Ukraine. Norway, in collaboration with the United States, will send 2 additional NASAMS anti-aircraft missile systems to Ukraine. And now for the Intelligence Report segment, starting as usual with the UK Ministry of Defense. On March 9, 2023, Russia conducted a wave of at least 80 long-range strikes against Ukrainian critical infrastructure. Russia deployed cruise missiles, air defense missiles in a surface-to-surface role, Iranian one-way attack uncrewed aerial vehicles, and an unusually large number of hypersonic air-launched ballistic missiles during the attack. This was the first major wave of long-range strikes since February 16, 2023, and likely one of the largest since December 2022. Ukrainian officials reported at least 11 civilians killed. The interval between waves of strikes is probably growing because Russia now needs to stockpile a critical mass of newly produced missiles directly from industry before it can resource a strike big enough to credibly overwhelm Ukrainian air defenses. A look at the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. The institute reported that Russia's largest missile strike in recent weeks likely only served Russian state propaganda objectives. Russian forces launched 81 missiles and 8 Iranian-made Shahed drones in the early morning of March 9th, targeting 11 oblasts. The Kremlin likely deliberately launched missiles that Ukrainian air defenses cannot intercept to achieve results within the Russian information space despite the dwindling supplies of such missiles. The researchers wrote that the attack is a Kremlin appeasement strategy for the Russian pro-war and ultra-nationalist communities who have criticized the ineffectiveness of previous missile attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure and demanded retaliation for the alleged incursion in Bryansk. The missile attacks, however, will not improve Russia's frontline positions. Russian forces likely advanced northwest of Bakhmut on March 9th amidst the likely increased tempo of Russian offensive operations in the area. The Wagner Group's offensive operation in eastern Bakhmut appears to have entered a temporary tactical pause, and it remains unclear if Wagner fighters will retain their operational preponderance in future Russian offensives in the city. Furthermore, the institute believes that Russian forces are preparing to resume offensive operations around Vuhledar, although persistent personnel and ammunition issues will likely continue to constrain Russian forces from advancing. The researchers recalled that footage published on March 8th reportedly shows personnel of the 136th Motorized Rifle Brigade of the 58th Combined Arms Army of the Southern Military District appealing to the Russian military command for more artillery ammunition before they replace the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade of the Pacific Fleet near Vuhledar and conduct ground attacks in the area. The 155th Naval Infantry Brigade suffered a significant part of the catastrophic losses that Russian forces suffered during their culminated 3-week February offensive to capture Vuhledar. The 136th Motorized Rifle Brigade is unlikely to achieve tactical advances near Vuhledar that the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade, 40th Naval Infantry Brigade, and other Russian formations failed to make following months of preparation to start offensives on this front. The likely degradation of other units in the area, significant equipment losses, and the reported continued artillery constraints will likely prevent Russian forces from securing significant tactical gains if they decide to resume offensives in the area. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. The enemy does not stop trying to enter the administrative border of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. The main efforts are focused on conducting offensive actions in the Liman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Marinka, and Shahtarsk directions. In the Liman direction, the enemy is trying to break through the defenses of our troops. In the direction of Bakhmut, the enemy does not stop its assaults. Our defenders repelled numerous attacks in the areas of the settlements of Ivanivske and Bakhmut. In the Avdiivka, Marinka, and Shahtarsk directions, the enemy carried out unsuccessful offensive actions in the direction of Kamyanka, Avdiivka, Severne, Vodanye, Pervomaiske, Nevelske, Krasnohorivka, Marinka, and Novo-Mikhailivka, Donetsk Oblast. In the Zaporizhia and Kherson directions, the enemy conducted defensive operations. In the settlements of Yazinuvata, Shtanivka, Kharkiv, Amrozivka of the temporarily occupied territory of Donetsk Oblast, in local occupation administrations and houses of culture, the Russian occupation, so-called authority, organized the handing over of party tickets of the Russian political party United Russia to local collaborators. The enemy continues to suffer losses. In the city of Berdyansk, Zaporizhia Oblast, as a result of fire damage by enemy units, local medical facilities are overflowing with wounded Russian occupiers. In particular, all female patients were discharged from the gynecological ward and 30 wounded Russians were admitted. 80 seriously wounded invaders were placed in the surgical and ENT departments. And with that, today's report is finished. As usual, you can find links to all the articles I mentioned in the description in case you want to read up on the details. If you enjoyed the report and found it informative, please consider sharing it with others and giving me a like. I hope you will join me again tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.